From the Gray Man Briefing, this is a summary of recent developments regarding the Second Amendment, cybersecurity, protests, supply chain disruptions, national security, law and order, free speech, censorship, government oversight, and more. Now, for your situational awareness, Super Essie will be reading out the latest update. Get briefs sent in real time at graymanbriefing.com. That's Gray with an A. Let's get into it.
Beginning with the Second Amendment today, the Supreme Court upheld a federal law preventing individuals under domestic violence restraining orders from possessing firearms. The 8-1 ruling emphasized that the law aligns with historical gun regulations, aiming to protect against individuals posing a clear threat. Chief Justice John Roberts clarified that the Second Amendment allows modern regulations if they are, quote, relevantly similar to historical laws. Judge Clarence Thomas dissented, arguing the government failed to prove the law fits its historical traditions. In Louisiana, the governor signed the Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act into law. This legislation protects the financial privacy of individuals purchasing firearms and ammunition by prohibiting financial institutions from using specific merchant category codes for these transactions. The law bans the assignment of firearms code in a way that distinguishes a firearm retailer from other retailers, and it prevents the creation of firearm ownership registries. The National Shooting Sports Foundation supports the law, which aims to prevent political exploitation and protect citizens' Second Amendment rights from unwarranted surveillance. The bill passed both chambers on June 11th, and it will go into effect on August 1st. Shifting into national security, Real Estate and Department of Defense geolocation cross-referencing reveals that Chinese Communist Party-linked persons and organizations have purchased farmland adjacent to 19 U.S. military installations. Identified bases include Fort Liberty or Fort Bragg in North Carolina, Fort Cavazos and Camp Bulis in Texas, Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton and Fort Irwin in California, Grand Forks Air Base in North Dakota, MacDill Air Force Base, Patrick Space Force Base, Fort Lewis, Maine Army National Guard, Hill Air Force Base, Dugway Proving Ground, Whiteman Air Force Base, Fort Leonard Wood, Yuma Proving Ground, multiple bases in Hawaii, Fort Moore, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and Naval Station Norfolk over there in Virginia. Analysts warned that these locations could be used for intelligence gathering or targeted for sabotage. Separate reports indicate Chinese intruders have attempted over 100 breaches of military facilities in recent years. The FBI and Department of Homeland Security have highlighted the significant threat posed by Chinese entities acquiring land near critical military sites. Next, reports indicate that North Korea will deploy military units to Ukraine to assist Russia in their invasion of the country. Construction and Engineering Corps members from the Korean People's Army Ground Force will operate in Russian-occupied Ukrainian territory. U.S. Department of Defense officials warn that North Korean troops could become, quote, cannon fodder in this conflict. The deployment follows a mutual defense aggression pact between Russian President Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, focusing on strengthening military cooperation. Next, U.S. military installations in Europe have been elevated to a Force Protection Condition Charlie alert status, indicating credible intelligence of a planned terrorist attack. All U.S. military facilities and personnel in Europe, including those in Germany, Italy, Romania, and Bulgaria, are affected. The nature of the threat is supposedly not tied to French elections, and specifics about the threat were not disclosed. This is the first time in probably the last 8 years that the Gray Man's been tracking that a FPCON Charlie status has been implemented in Europe. Okay, now let's look at civil unrest and political unrest. In Atlanta, Georgia, on June 27th, over 300 pro-Biden and 2,000 pro-Trump citizens rallied along routes to and outside of the CNN studio where the first 2024 presidential debate took place. Separately, 1,000-plus pro-Palestinians marched to the studio building chanting, "Defund the U.S. war machine," and "Palestine will be free." The day following the debate, 550 pro-Biden citizens attended a political rally in Raleigh, North Carolina, where Biden spoke and had 2 rappers there as well singing songs. Biden's speech was disrupted by pro-Palestinian protesters there in Raleigh. Also, on that same day after the debate, 12,000 pro-Trump citizens attended a political rally in Chesapeake, Virginia, where Trump spoke. In New York City, pro-Palestinians rallied alongside a pro-Trump citizen group in opposition to Biden, joining together in a rally against Biden. So both pro-Trump citizens and pro-Palestinians rallied against Biden in New York City. Separately, in the city, a van crashed into a nail salon, causing a mass casualty incident. At the time this was written, it was unsure if the two were connected. All right, so keep in mind that all these briefs that I'm reading out, they're from the Gray Man Briefing. I'm just giving you kind of a quick run through, a couple of sentences about each topic. But if any of these interest you, if you want to see videos, sources, or the Gray Man's analysis, make sure you sign up for their service. It's $5 a month. We have a coupon at the end of the broadcast here. Sign up. They send you these briefs via like a message on Telegram and Signal, and also a weekly email. Let's move over now into government oversight. Court documents revealed that the Department of Justice authorized the use of deadly force during the warrant service, or raid as some people call it, on Mar-a-Lago. Federal agents were instructed to use deadly force when necessary, and agents were prepared with standard issue weapons, ammos, handcuffs, and bolt cutters. The documents show that agents were instructed to wear unmarked polo or collared shirts and to keep law enforcement equipment concealed. Next, the Department of Energy announced the release of 42 million gallons of gasoline from the Northeast Gasoline Supply Reserve to lower costs for American families and consumers during the summer driving season, according to the DOE. This move is aimed at reducing gas prices ahead of the 2024 elections. The release follows a similar move prior to the 2022 midterms. Next, the Department of Justice has filed a federal lawsuit against Oklahoma to invalidate HB 4156, a law making it a state crime to remain in the state illegally, and it provides law enforcement with arresting powers regarding illegal immigrants. The DOJ aims to ensure that Oklahoma adheres to the Constitution and the framework adopted by Congress for regulation of immigration. The Oklahoma Attorney General argues that the state is addressing an ongoing public crisis through appropriate legislation. So the federal government does not want Oklahoma to rid its state of illegals, and there you go. And we've got actually a couple of things here on Oklahoma. Not sure why, but a lot's happening in that state. So the governor has signed Senate Bill 426 into law, preventing the enforcement of health mandates from international organizations such as the World Health Organization, or WHO, the UN, and the WEF, that's the World Economic Forum. The bill claims to protect Oklahomans' personal liberties by ensuring that health-related decisions are made by elected representatives and local authorities, not by global entities. The new law prohibits the enforcement of international mandates on masks, vaccines, or medical testing within the state, and restricts these organizations from collecting information about Oklahoma residents. Also, in Oklahoma, the superintendent of public instruction in Oklahoma has required the state's Department of Education to incorporate the Bible and 10 Commandments into the school's curriculum. The initiative is supposedly aimed at teaching students about the history of the country, Western civilization, and the basis of the legal system. This move has sparked debate over the separation of church and state and the appropriateness of religious content in public education. Now we've got 3 major government oversights dealing with Supreme Court rulings, and we'll do this as a quick legal update for you. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled 6-2 in favor of fishermen challenging a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the NOAA rule, requiring payment for at-sea monitors. The decision overruled the Chevron doctrine, which allows courts to defer to agency interpretations of ambiguous laws. Chief Justice John Roberts stated that the courts must now exercise independent judgment on agency actions. The ruling rejects attempts to allow unelected leaders and bureaucrats to determine how laws are interpreted. The ruling significantly checks administrative power, affecting how federal agencies create and enforce regulations. SCOTUS rendered the decision after commercial fishing companies asked the highest court to limit, basically, the federal government's use of that Chevron deference. in what conservatives and the fishing industry called a war on the administrative state. In 2 cases related to government overreach in fishing industries, plaintiffs challenged the National Marine Fisheries Service and their creation of regulations that required a federal minimum wage of $710 a day for a federally required observer to be present on their fishing boats. Fishermen argued that paying for a mandated monitor to track their catches, even on days where they don't catch anything, is making the fishing of sea life, specifically herrings, unprofitable. So when they go out to catch or net fish, they have to have a federal monitor on board. And this is not a law. This is how the Chevron deference was, or the Chevron doctrine was basically being used to do this without any law being made. While the case centered on commercial fishing, the SCOTUS ruling will have a national impact that degrades federal overreach while limiting the deep state. Next, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of the city of Grant Pass, Oregon, by finding that bans on public encampments and sleeping by homeless persons are not cruel and are not unusual, nor do they violate the Eighth Amendment's protections, even when the state or city doesn't provide adequate shelter. The decision emphasizes that cities need not consider the availability of shelter options before enforcing camping bans, as criminalizing homelessness that disrupts public or causes safety issues without providing alternative housing is constitutional. Supporters of the decision say that the court has now restored the ability of cities on the front lines of this rampant homelessness and crime crisis to develop lasting solutions that meet the needs of the most vulnerable members of their communities while also keeping our public spaces safe and clean. The SCOTUS ruling will have a national impact by allowing local and state leaders to enact bans on violent, homeless criminals and less fortunate persons' abilities to set up tents and camps in public spaces, like on sidewalks in front of buildings and schools. Some 600,000 homeless persons daily sleep on our sidewalks and in parks, which lead to degraded home values, higher crime, rampant drug use, and business closures. The SCOTUS ruling allows localities to stop such ongoing actions if they so choose. In most cases, this would be done by fining the homeless people and then arresting repeat offenders. Finally, in the Supreme Court's recent span of rulings, SCOTUS ruled on July 1st that former President Trump maintains presidential immunity for his actions while in office, distinguishing between official and official acts, of course. This decision reiterated that Trump has absolute, quote, absolute immunity for official acts, but he is not entirely shielded from prosecution for actions deemed unofficial. The court held, quote, under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential powers entitles a former president to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority, and he is entitled to at least presumptive immunity for prosecution for all his official acts. There is no immunity for unofficial acts, end quote. The court's ruling focused on clarifying the extent of presidential immunity, which is not explicitly detailed in the U.S. Constitution. The decision further read, quote, this case is the first criminal prosecution in our nation's history of a former president for actions taken during his presidency. Determining whether and under what circumstances such a prosecution may proceed requires careful assessment of the scope of presidential power under the Constitution. The nature of that power requires that a former president have some immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts during his tenure in office. At least with respect to the president's exercise of his core constitutional powers, this immunity must be absolute. As for his remaining official actions, he is entitled to at least presumptive immunity. Yeah, that's a mouthful. All right, we're going to move now into supply chain and labor force. John Deere, the farming equipment company, announced layoffs for 610 production staff due to their shifting of operations to Mexico and, according to them, reduced demand. The layoffs affect plants in both Illinois and Iowa, and it's effective on August 30th. Workers will receive unemployment benefits and profit-sharing options. John Deere cites rising operational costs and the need for increased efficiency as reasons for the shift. Walgreens Pharmacy plans to close 150 stores in the U.S. by the end of August of this year as part of its cost-cutting efforts. This move is driven by lower demand for COVID-related services and reduced consumer spending, leading to significant decrease in shares since 2023. I believe it was 43% loss in shares. Walgreens aims to achieve $4.1 billion in cost savings and will lay off 504 corporate employees, primarily at its headquarters in Illinois. The Department of Homeland Security Supply Chain Resiliency Center partnered with the Department of Transportation and Transport Canada to conduct a joint supply chain disruption exercise. This happened back in June of this year. The exercise simulated severe winter weather events impacting U.S. and Canadian border crossings, aiming to assess and improve cross-border transportation resiliency. An after-action review is due up in August. Global supply chains are continuing to face disruptions at the Suez and Panama canals due to geopolitical conflicts. Basically, at least one of the canals, it's Houthi rebels shooting ships. Also, they claim it's environmental factors such as water levels leading to these higher shipping costs. The Suez Canal has been affected by conflicts in Gaza and attacks by, like I said, the Houthi militias, while drought conditions at the Panama Canal have limited vessel passages. Companies like Ashley Furniture are adding surcharges to offset rising costs, and the Red Sea sees Uber-style price surges due to increased security risks. These issues have sharply increased global shipping rates and consumer prices. Well, that's it for this week's summary of recent developments. Remember that these briefings are delivered in real time to Grayman Briefing subscribers at graymanbriefing.com, sent via the Telegram and Signal apps, as well as a weekly email. Due to time constraints and the risk of censorship, we don't cover it all here on this broadcast. The Grayman Brief is open to the public on Instagram and Telegram, so give them a follow and leave a comment either here or on Grayman Brief's socials. Thanks for listening. Remain aware, be vigilant, and stay safe.
Get unredacted, real-time briefings sent via email and through the Telegram and Signal apps by joining the Grayman Briefing.